Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 47 of the Say Again podcast with me, Amrita Tripathi. We have a very special guest today, Pramath Raj Sinha, who has been called an institution builder, and you'll just hear why. He's founder chairman of the Board of Trustees of the Ashoka University, founding senior partner of J3, founding dean of ISB. We're going to ask him more about all of these roles. Pramath, I think there are many more designations: entrepreneur, academic administrator, executive, even philanthropist. We're going to, double click on some of these hats that you wear. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
So, I want to start by asking you something that is top of mind for everyone, no matter what industry we're in. It seems that, we're in this era of the rise of AI. Gen AI is having an impact on pretty much every aspect of our lives. Could you talk to us a little bit about the way you see this play out in education? And if you think it's going to help address some of the major problems of education? You've spoken in the past about how the old models in India, for example, just cannot reach anyone or everyone.
I do think it's going to have a profound impact on education. I think education, as they say, is going to be a used case where AI is going to be very disruptive. It's going to affect students in the way that they learn. It is going to affect teachers in the way that they impart learning. And it's going to affect educational institutions in the way they run programs. And in effect, the whole education system itself is going to be heavily impacted because perhaps the relevance of some of the way we do education is going to completely fade away. Vinod Khosla, the famous innovator, investor, just is recently doing the rounds on social media for having saying that elite universities and elite degrees are finished as a result of this. So obviously some of these doomsday predictions or these extreme predictions may not ever happen, but I think he still has a point in making the provocative point that things are going to get disrupted. What does this mean? I think you won't be able to stop students, Amrita. They will use whatever means they have to learn. And I think it's going to be great for the curious, the enthusiastic, the innovative students who are going to try out different things and experience them and learn how to use them. And they're going to be able to, obviously, as the new generation, be much faster, quicker at it than you and I are going to be quite naturally, because they don't have any legacy systems or models that they're used to. I think there are some people who are going to get caught in the middle and they're going to find it difficult to adjust to this new world because they will have to completely change the way they learn. They leverage AI. They will have to learn how to ask the right questions in terms of prompts and which AI to use, how to use it, what to look out for and avoid, not make mistakes and so on, not become too dependent yet use it all the time. And I think the educators and teachers are going to find it doubly difficult because their students are going to be way ahead of them. And keeping up with them will be difficult. And how do you adapt what you teach to the new student of the future, the AI-enabled student? Do you even need to teach some of the stuff that you talk? Because people don't need to understand the concept and understand the inner workings of things anymore, because it's all available to them at their fingertips. As this guy who's the Perplexity founder, Arvind Srinivasan, if his last name, he said, all the answers are now there in the world. So the question is not about whether or not you have an answer. The answer is there. The question is, how do you find the answer, or what question do you ask, and what is the right question to ask? So how do you teach that capability and skill to somebody? Because that's the more important skill to learn rather than just simply solving a problem using reasoning and logic, which AI is doing for you, is now the big challenge for teachers and educators. I don't have answers, but I think we have to very quickly start to come up with answers on what do we do in this kind of setup.
Yeah, no, thank you. That's a very thoughtful response. I do want to ask you if you feel that, in some way we've seen, the way the education system in India, and I think by necessity prioritizes essentially employability, right? Employable skills in a way. We've heard in the past also that, there's at least the school level of emphasis on rote learning, that's very last century actually, and that needs to change in any case. But do you think somewhere the fact that we'll be delegating a lot, and many of us are already using these tools, and it's easier and easier to actually delegate, your thought process to Gen AI, and it's only going to get better. Do you think, especially when it comes to education and how that, I feel like the college life, at least undergrad to grad, is such an important phase in our overall development, right? I want to ask you if you feel that something will be lost in that process, because sometimes uh, in striving to learn we are also gaining something, and there's someone I was speaking to was saying that the drudgery, for example, before you master anything, there's some merit to that process. Now, do you think that's also an outdated way of looking at things, and everyone will have to adapt, because that might be a longer term impact?
I don't think that's an outdated way, Amrita. I agree with some of the people who feel that the drudgery is necessary. But then there are also people who don't necessarily like or want that drudgery. And then remember, in our country, there are very large numbers of people who are getting neither the education nor the drudgery because they just don't have access to information, to learning and education of the quality that you're talking about. Or even if they are at institutions, so called, the quality is very poor. So they are today getting nothing. Now, for them, this is a big step up. And by the way, that's at least in higher ed, that is a majority of people in this country. Remember.
Yeah.
I think the answer to your question, though, and your question is a pertinent one, is that now there will be no one size fits all. So I think what this enables is a world where only if you do want to have the 4 years of being on a pristine campus with great teachers, do it all together in 4 years, experience that, and you feel that you've earned that somehow, or you're privileged to have that somehow, or you want that somehow, then I do think that people will continue to do that. But equally, people will say, look, if I can't get that, and particularly in countries like India where you have no choice, you're not getting it, then all is not over for me. I can still go out and learn. I can still go out and strive for things on my own. Now, the question is, will our systems catch up enough and fast enough? I think eventually they will. It's a question of when it'll happen. I hope that we have the foresight and the insight to rapidly accelerate this world so that even if people don't have a full school education or any college education, they can use AI to their advantage to further their careers, their aspirations, and so on. I think that's the power of what is happening. But there may still be, like you said, people who feel like, look, I don't need to go back and work immediately, go out and work immediately. I want to learn. I want to submit myself to the 4 years of outdated traditional college models, right? And that will be there too.
That's interesting. I don't know if anyone wants to go. Like, I feel like it's in retrospect, you look back and you're like, oh, that drudgery was important. I feel like at that moment, at that age, 16, 17, you're kind of like, let's get on with it. But, I just want to build on this with you a little bit. So I was going through the transcript of your session at Rising Bharat. I'll link to this in the show notes. It's on money control. And you talk about this being a game changer for people who are not getting an education anyway, who may not have hope for a job. And you said they may completely leapfrog going to school or college in our system, and that's fascinating. It's the way we also leapfrogged to mobiles, rather than laptops. Can you build on that a little bit?
Yes, Amrita. Look, if you grow up in a second tier, third tier town, uh, you grow up in a village, you are not lucky enough to get to a pathway like go to a Navodaya school from which you are recognized and picked up with a scholarship to go to Ashoka, right? Uh, you are in a Navodaya school, you are bright, you are working, you are studying in a local school in a second tier, third tier town in Dehri on Son or Saharanpur, right? It's not a very well recognized school. You do well, you know, you think you deserve better, but because of where you are, which school you went to, what board you were in, your English, you don't get into a good university, you don't get into a new college, you're languishing, right? You know internally, and the world perhaps also, some people recognize that you have tremendous potential. Now, I think through technology driven, digital, online, remote, whatever you call it, education, and now powered by AI, if you are self motivated, then you can learn whatever you want. And again, you might say, look, how can this person be like a person who goes to a proper university with peer group and so on? Of course not, and maybe not. But look, they are getting nothing right now. So it's a big step up for them. They have much more agency. I don't want to be idealistic about it. Part of the reason we set up the education system way we did it, and we did the drudgery, was because you wanted to not take a chance on different people's motivations. You know, if I'm not really motivated to go to college and you don't force me to, I won't go, right? So, but here I'm assuming that there are enough people out there who are motivated, who are driven, who are saying, look, I need to get ahead in life, I need to do something more. I think they can educate themselves, if I can use that phrase, and say that, look, they don't need to get into an Ashoka or any Delhi university to get the education. If you couldn't get in, it's okay. Other pathways to get that education. It may not be the same education, but it will still be pretty good education, maybe in some ways better quality education than you could have gotten otherwise. And then the point I'm also making in that model is to say, and you can do that throughout your life. I give the example of the fact that I got a software job out of IIT, even though my bachelor's degree was in metallurgical engineering. I had done one course in computer programming for which TCS gave me a very nice, cushy job, which I didn't take and went on to do higher studies. But the truth is, you don't need a 4-year training in many of these positions, where if you just have skilled up in time, you can get a good opportunity. So, this notion of continuous lifelong learning, this notion that you can do just in time learning, that your learning doesn't have to be done all at once and then you wait for the things to happen that may or may not utilize your learning, uh, are all things that are real today. If you look at some of the more exceptional cases, including for me 40 years ago when I graduated, one course gets you a job, not a 4-year degree. So I think you will see a lot of more of this happening, where people are going to say, look, if there's somebody who's coming, who've studied on their own, and they have been credentialed, mind you. So it's not like they are claiming themselves to be a XYZ or having a certain capability. There are going to be credentialing is not going away anywhere. People will still certify you, but it may not be traditional universities. And once the credentialing happens, you can get any opportunity. And opportunities are changing so fast anyway that the education to train you for that opportunity is also not there. So you are taking a bet on Amrita for a AI job, even though she doesn't have a degree in AI, because you're betting on the fact that, hey, she's smart enough and she's figured out prompt engineering, which doesn't require an engineering degree, and she can be a AI uh, professional for me. So I think you're going to see a lot more of that happening, and it's truly liberating for all of those folks who are today not able to access the traditional pathways, which are all tightly gated and controlled. Now, again, you may think that I sometimes, when I say this, I'm such a traditionalist when it comes to education that sometimes I don't believe myself when I'm saying this. But the reason I'm saying this is that I can see this happening. It's happening. When we created Harappa, uh, one of the reasons we created Harappa was because we wanted to understand, is this digital learning thing for real? And can you teach leadership skills online? And I would like to believe that you can now, having tried out different things, because the ways in which you can use technology driven education are quite fascinating. You actually can't do that in the classroom. There are many things you can't do that in the classroom that you can do online. Very personalized education, very safe space. There's nobody watching you in class, right? To say, oh, she didn't answer that question right. So you can ask tough questions. And there's so many things I can tell you. So I do think that the whole model for education is getting completely disrupted. And it's as disruptive as when the textbook came in. It was really the textbook that led to the classroom where I can teach my students a book written by Amrita Tripathi about how to do a podcast, even if I have not written the book or I don't have the curriculum, because there's a book and the book has assignments and questions and I can design quizzes and so on. uh, Today that has become democratized.
That's actually fascinating. I think you certainly hit the nail on the head for those of us who don't always think about like how privilege and gatekeeping works, right? When we think about education and jobs, it's such a big one. Do you think though this means as you said, credentialing was not going to go away? That's also a fascinating insight because I was looking at that interview of yours with Forbes where you said, for example, that formal degrees may not be necessary anymore to get a job. I- Isn't that like an entrenched almost a tradition in India though, like that sort of emphasis on the degree? And just given the level of competition, the nature of competition, do you think that sort of all eyes will be on the credentialing now in terms of like how do you get ready? This future ready workforce is obviously going to need to be more specialized even. Is that something you would agree? And number two, how does then that democratizing of Gen AI, let's say, or these LLMs, how does that work in tandem with institutions? Or do you think institutions will have to invest in that to democratize, or do you think individuals will have much more agency?
I have no doubt that institutions will have to invest, because their students will be way ahead of them. And if you don't invest, you don't stand a chance, is my take. uh, I was just talking to a very big provider today about starting a pilot at Ashoka. I know that ISB is talking to a large provider as well to institutionally provide. I mean, if you're providing a library, if you're providing a robotics lab, if you're providing a maker space, if you're providing dining and residence and gym on campus, I think you have to provide proper AI on campus. Today, there's no way out. Uh, but the point I wanted to make to answer your question directly. Remember NIIT? Remember AppTech? Remember Hexaware? And remember all these companies that sprouted up? What were they doing? They're basically doing credentialing for software engineers. So yes, the horde of people going to tech programs, CS programs, engineering schools, that continued. But these intermediaries appeared because the formal education system couldn't keep up with the demand, not just in terms of numbers, but being able to train people in coding. So these intermediaries copped up and said, okay, we'll give you a layer of coding on top. I'm sure many of your journalist friends in those days went and got NIIT degrees and hopped off into the IT sector.
That's true.
And by the way, over time, they also declined or plateaued out because as the companies grew, they built their own in-house NIITs and aptechs. So this kind of evolution has happened in all high demand, low supply type situations. And I suspect that that is going to happen here. In fact, I'm saying that that is already happening.
It's already happening.
Because Upgrad provides lots of data science and AI certification. In fact, the most popular course in Upgrad, and I can say this because I was part of Upgrad and I'm a shareholder, is a data science course offered by Triple IT Bangalore, which is one of their longest standing courses. At ISB, the enrollment for our short-term certification on business analytics runs into many thousands. Our MBA program is just 900 students a year, which is our flagship program. So we we assume that everybody is going to college and everybody's focused on degrees and everybody wants degrees, and we read about PhDs driving autos and so on. So yes, degrees are being wasted. That's a different problem.
Yeah.
You don't need to credential everyone with a bachelor's, master's, and PhD degree. And when people don't get jobs, I think they end up using degrees as a proxy as they wait for the right opportunity to come their way. So that's a different problem. I think because we are not creating enough opportunities for people, they are going off to college and waiting, biding their time. But honestly, if you ask me, even in the past in this country, the biggest professions have had credentialing outside of the formal system. And that's the point I wanted to.
That's very interesting. Yeah, I didn't think of it that way at all. So many questions for you. You brought up, well, of course, Harappa had a successful exit. Congratulations on that. We're going to touch upon your entrepreneurship as well. And this EdTech space, it sounds like, I did want to ask you, and I think it sounds like you are, you're still bullish on EdTech. There's a lot that's been happening in this sector.
Absolutely. And again, this is a pattern, Amrita. If you study new industries and new technologies, there's always a spate of companies that come in the beginning who are a little bit ahead of their times, a little bit too smart and too cute for their own good, right? Because it's flavor of the month, investors are chasing it, you make a little bit of hay while the sun shines, but then you have a cleanup, and then resilient, a new crop, and some of the resilient companies survive and continue to build. So I think absolutely, I think what you've seen is a blip in the long journey. And now, Amrita, given everything we are saying right now, with AI, this is going to get an even bigger boost. At Harappa, we used to take so much time to create one course. If I had to create a 4-hour course, it used to take a long time. You'd write it, do the research, come up with the script, find the, create assignments, quizzes. My God, you can now do that at a flip of a switch and a snap of your finger. One of our Young India Fellow alums from Ashoka, who went to the US for her master's, and she came from the field of designing videos, by the way, but did all this digital media and technology and learning at Harvard and MIT. She just sent me a demo video of something where you can design a course sitting at your desk in about half an hour, 45 minutes. It actually is a step by step. Type in the learning outcomes, feed in all that you have in terms of what you want it to use as material, and boom, comes out. Here are the lectures, here are the modules, here are the assignments, here are the quizzes, here are the assessments, here are the final exam, here's the final paper. Incredible.
Yeah.
So I think online learning, you can almost create courses on demand like that.
And I suppose curating those or knowing, what's going to be helpful, that's going to be the trick.
Correct.
The secret sauce.
Correct. But then you ask the questions to AI, right? So you have agentic AI now. So you have your agent that is asking and doing the filtering.
We used to always hear this in between media and the tech industry that we're all replaceable. And I'm just constantly, when I'm listening to you, I'm like, oh my God, we really are all pretty expendable as
I think
employees.
it's the question is, how do you make yourself not replaceable?
Yeah.
And I do think that there is an answer to that question for all of us.
Pray tell, taking notes.
Which is to know how to use the new technology.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you will become, if you used to write one article a week, you can now write an article every day. And your creativity and your range of subjects and themes knows no bounds now. You may have been only writing about entrepreneurship before, but you can write about education if you want because you are smart. And so you'll ask the right question. Is this guy Pramath Sinha saying all this thing? Go ingest all the stuff he said and find the loopholes in his logic.
Yeah, that's true. Yes. Yeah.
What are you can do that on each of your podcast guests, right? And write an article, right? How have things advanced in the area that he's talking about? Right? I mean, human beings, the creativity of human mind has no bounds. And I think the question we have to all ask is, look, of course, it's not going to take away. I'm much smarter. But how can I add now on top of what we have? Most of us didn't need to do that before, because just because of your superior skill in researching and crafting an argument and writing an article and headlining it, you got away with taking a week to do it, and your editor still waited for you and extended your deadline. Uh, Now they are going to value you the fact that every day Amrita is coming up with something completely new and different, because she has the whole library of knowledge of the world at her disposal.
Yeah, it's pretty revolutionary when you put it like that. You're absolutely right. I do want to, switch gears and ask you a little bit about ISB. When I was looking this up, I didn't realize it's actually been 23 years of ISB.
25.
25 years.
We are going to start celebrating our 25th.
Oh, brilliant. Okay, their site needs to update. Note to ISB team. 25 years, 20,000 plus alumni globally, and you were the founding dean. So I'm going to use this to ask you about ISB and also segue into your own professional journey a little bit, because I was just reading that you took a year off from McKinsey to do this. And it seems, looking back now, it seems like, of course, India was ready for a sort of global level, business school. But at that time, and I actually got this from an ISB alum who was saying, people didn't really have the highest expectations going in until ISB was set up, of private educational institutions in India. They were saying that you didn't really expect world-class education, at that time. So can you take us through a little bit of that vision, and what made you really think, okay, I'll take a year off my very cool, steady job at McKinsey and become the founding dean, because it really is skin in the game for you at that stage?
Yeah, let me say that there are many facets to my answer. I got involved in ISB because I happened to be at McKinsey when Rajat Gupta was the head of the firm globally. He was the one who really had the vision that we could create something high quality and world class in India. And I have to give him full credit for it. I just happened to be a bystander who joined the journey. It wasn't my belief, it was his belief, and my basically belief, having faith in him and his ability. He was much more my senior at that point in time. I was just starting in the firm and he was already heading it. So he had years of cumulative experience. And I think, having worked around the world and having seen institutions around the world, I think Rajat fundamentally did believe that it was possible, which helped all of us a lot. And then, of course, he corralled a bunch of Indian CEOs and business leaders to join. But it was really his vision and people's faith and trust in him being the global head of McKinsey that, hey, this guy knows what he's talking about, so maybe it'll happen. It is true that we were all skeptical. Like, it was a startup and it was an idea, and it hadn't been done till that point in time. My own involvement in that started small, but I really started to enjoy doing the work, the challenge. And I used to be an academic, and I hadn't been very successful as an academic post my academic career. So that helped me because I knew how academics operated, and I also knew what high quality academics was, what not to do. And it forced me to think back to all my learnings about good academics and bad academics. And of course, I had the benefit of lots of good people advising us. I didn't know this then, but looking back, I think I'm good at getting stuff done. So I think that combination of all this advice coming from different people and my ability to not get fussed about the drudgery, right, of getting detailed stuff done, getting approvals from the government, getting the project done on the ground, and so on. helped a lot in that project. Now, I was not supposed to be the dean, Amrita. Actually, my year at McKinsey, of taking off from McKinsey, was a bit of a thing I was forced into, because what happened was that we had, in fact, two deans who were coming in, world class, world famous people. And this story has been told before, so I won't go into it in the interest of time. But Sumantra Ghoshal and Deepak Jain, two iconic business school academics and administrators and leaders, were supposed to be at the helm. And for some reason or the other, both of them at the last minute couldn't come. So the board had to take a call on who's going to lead this institution. And I was the one standing because I had been involved in building it from the start. And I had a PhD. And I had the credibility of the new students who were coming in, because they were the most affected, right? They had signed up to be in the first batch. And now the people who had stood up in front of them and said, hey, come, we'll take care of you, were gone. And somebody had to step in. Now, they all knew me because I had been involved in the building and the admissions process. So I was, in a way, the only way we could pacify an irate bunch of 100 students who had left their jobs, paid high fees, and come in with all this high expectation. And right before the start of the institution, you are without the ship's captain. I mean, it was actually a disaster. So I took a year off to be the dean as an almost like an acting interim 12th man, night watchman dean, right? However, what helped was in fact the fact that I had been involved from the very beginning. So that continuity helped. And of course, what has now helped is that I've remained involved these last 25 years in a different capacity as a board member, as in somebody who has institutional memory and continuity. So that was what the journey was. But I think that we got lucky, as is true for, I mean, of course, you get lucky only when you make the effort, but it worked out. It worked out. Many of our bets worked out. Our not getting AICT approval, uh, our location in Hyderabad, which took off as a city as well. Otherwise, we would be sunk if it had, Hyderabad had not become what it has. If Hyderabad, even in Chandigarh, we have issues because, nobody wants, it's not as attractive a destination as Hyderabad is. So lots of things then went in our favor. The country's continued growth and economic progress and creation of more and more and high quality, high paying jobs. In those days, we would have never imagined that 25 years ago, we started with a fee of about 7.5 lakhs. Today, we charge, 45 lakhs or so for a degree in India. And I'm sorry, not even a degree, a certification and credentialing, going back to credentials in India. And it's not just about the fee, but how well our alums have done. Today, McKinsey and BCG and Bain, which remain the most coveted employers, recruit their largest cohort of folks every year from ISB, not from any of the IIMs any longer. I mean, they recruit, but ours is the largest intake. So it's been incredible, the journey. And of course, that has given many more people the confidence to build good institutions, and they have come up, whether it is Ashoka or Kriya or Flame or many of the Shiv Nadar and Munjal and NIIT. All these universities and institutions were born out of the confidence that you could build something high quality in India.
Yeah, which is why it's so incredible to see ISB, right? Because that's almost the legacy has been to show that this is possible. I do want to ask you a couple more questions there. I mean, so I remember I was in the US covering news a bit for CNN IBN when the Rajat Gupta trial was happening. And that was a time when he was getting a lot of, I remember the court where the judge was noting all the letters of, commendation to his character. I do want to ask you this, and it'll tie into my question on leadership. I feel like you have had, you've come out in public to support and say that, you did still believe in Rajat Gupta. You've just, of course, credited him with the vision for ISB as well. When that happened, though, and when the court case was going on in the trial, etc., did it have like a blowback effect on ISB, or were you all able to kind of sort of keep a buffer? Do you feel?
I think we were able to keep a buffer, Amrita, and I think that was again Rajat's big vision, where he taught me the best lesson in institution building, which is it cannot be dependent on one individual. And this idea of collective philanthropy and collective ownership, and combined with shared governance, where you're not dependent on one business group or one individual, because in those cases that person or that institute, that corporate's uh, reputation becomes synonymous with the institution. It becomes conflated. Whatever one person does, it reflects on the other. So here it is true that Rajat was the head of our board at that time. And it is also true that I had the painful duty of calling him and asking him to step down, not just from the chair of the board, but also as a member of our board. And he hasn't ever been able to come back to that. Uh, but he was the one who taught us all that, look, you have to do what is right for the institution. So the institution immediately took action. They immediately distanced itself. And I do think that Rajat felt that maybe we acted too quickly. In fact, many times his wife has told me that you guys could have stood by him. The ISB, if McKinsey couldn't, ISB could have. But it was difficult in those days, and I think everybody reacted, our board and so on. So those were difficult times, but I think we were able to distance ourselves sufficiently and honor our commitment and our loyalty to Rajat. He now comes and teaches a course. We teach together, in fact, not the same course, but around the same time. And we realized that, we've never been together on campus for a week at a time, ever. But we now are. So it's a bittersweet thing, but I do think that having lots of Adi Godrej immediately stepped in as chairman. There were many board members who remained throughout, stayed with the institution, made sure the institution did not pay a price for that. So I do think we are very resilient because of that. And I think that I feel very confident that Ashoka is the same way. I think a few of us are very involved and sometimes seen as key to the institution. But I can tell you that if any one of us, whether it's Ashish or Sanjeev or myself or several others, if something was to happen to us, the institution will be fine. And things have happened, as you know. But I think the resilience comes from that ownership that rests with many people and not just one.
So that bench strength is almost like the most formidable thing. You've been able to create institutions that have deep, deep bench strength. You're also, when I was doing the founding provost of Anant National University, which is focused on design. It's a little newer, something we were talking about. I want to ask you, when you look at your career, and I will come back to this actually. Let me segue my question and split it into one is, I've never seen you use your PhD as, most people with a PhD will say doctor. I've never seen you address yourself or write in your byline doctor. How important was that PhD to you in this part of your career? You alluded to it when you said, you became the founding dean. It was helpful when it comes to academia. But when you're looking at some of these more future-facing kind of roles, and I think the Anant University, for example, focused on design, that would be India's first as well, if I'm not mistaken. Where do you think that your career has made sense looking back or looking forward? Did you, once you made your foray into education, was that it? You realized this is what you want to be focusing on?
Yeah. I mean, I was very disappointed with myself, honestly, when I couldn't make a career in education in the first go, when I was looking to just be an academic. And like in many cases, I think I was very colored by my first employment experience post PhD. I had a blast with my PhD. I really enjoyed it, and I
And this
worshipped
this was
my
in the US. This is
yeah,
the
the US at University of Pennsylvania, and I'm very close to my PhD advisor. She's in her 90s now, and even though I left the field, and she has been a huge champion of me and me of her. I'm actually writing a book about her. So that was a very golden phase, if you can call it, in my life, and I look back at it very fondly. Tremendous learning and tremendous confidence building. And then I was hit by a real dead end where I crashed and burned and realized, wow, I don't want to be an actor. Fortunately, I discovered McKinsey and that helped me. But then I completely gave up on that part of my life.
Sorry, can I ask you, was that the more traditional academic route, as in you would have been teaching, or
yes. I was at the University of Toronto. I was doing research, teaching, and I would have continued and I've become an assistant professor, associate
got it?
professor, and so
Got
on.
it.
And maybe I would have gone into administration roles, but I don't think I would have been setting up universities or anything like that. So McKinsey did a very interesting thing in that it enabled me to come back to India. But then serendipity again got me in a situation where I was involved in setting up a new university in Malaysia, and you may have heard that story. But yes, then the PhD started to help, at least behind the scenes in the conversations with the academics and with senior administrators. So even though I had not followed the traditional academic path, people respected the fact that I had the academic chops to get a PhD from a top university. And of course, the fact that I had already been at IIT helped as well. I mean, the world is taken up with these
Having a
symbols.
pedigree, yes, of course.
That's right.
IIT,
So
I think,
that helps,
yeah.
right? And the combination of that, I think, helped a lot. And so I did get a seat at the table. I got attention. I was able to participate in conversations with some credibility where people didn't have their hackles up. Some people did, like, you're a McKinsey consultant, what do you know? You're a business guy, what do you know? And why should you, having left academia, have the privilege of setting something up and I don't, right? So there was some of that dynamic also. But in general, I do think that has helped me, even if I don't write it or put it out there, because people in the room know, people in the know, and that helps.
It's such a
Definitely helps.
it's such a cool flex, though, I have to say. And this is something that, of course, academics would appreciate, but even non-academics, I think the fact that you have that doctorate, the world is, of course, changing right now. But I do want to ask you then, so when you look back at your career, or even the last 10, 15 years, do you look at success and failure any differently? And this might be different with your entrepreneurial hat versus, institution building, but how do you view success or failure today, that we might learn from?
See, to me, it's about trying new things out. And then success and failure are on par. It takes you time to realize that. It's nice for me to be able to say that now. But obviously, it hurt you a lot when you fail early in the early years, or when you fail, first times you fail. It hits you very hard and it flattens you, shatters you, feels devastating. But somehow, I think I saw some of these setbacks in my career early enough. And I don't mean to say this to get any sympathy. I think it happens to all of us. But early on, but a lot of people cruise along for a long time before something really hits them. And when it hits them later in life, they're like, what do I do now? And it all comes crumbling. I think because I had come out of failures, not knowing that, oh, I'm up to challenges, or I struggled. But what do? You realize that human beings have amazing resilience and power. So you soldier on. So once you come out on the other side, you realize that, hey, that was not so bad. And at least I learned a lot. And I learned stuff about what I shouldn't do. And I don't need to do or don't want to do ever. Right. So very quickly, I started to realize in the early days that, look, these failures are good because they give me clarity. They give me certainty. They give me confidence too in their own way, that it feels really shitty for a bit. But once you come out of it, then you come out really charged up. So then I realized that, look, you can't predict when you'll get a positive opportunity. Who knew ISB was going to become successful? Who knew that I was going to leave academia and get a chance to build a university, and that too in Malaysia? I mean, it was unheard of. Yeah. So then I realized that, look, you can't predict the future anyway. So you may as well try out stuff. Try out stuff that you find interesting. So I try not to try out everything. People think that I'm so random that I'm doing everything, and that's not true. I'm actually using some filter. what I want to do, build a design university.
Yeah.
So Anant is a good example because what people don't realize, they think that I'm building all these institutions because I want the glory of building lots of institutions. Actually, what the truth is that I love building new institutions, but I want to do something different each time. So that's my high coming out of saying, okay, let me try. If somebody is giving me an opportunity to do something different, then I'll jump at it. If you came to me and said, oh, help me do another design university, I'll say, Amrita, I'll give you all the gyan, you go do it. I'm here to support you. But if you come and tell me that, I want to build a university that, teaches spirituality, then you'll get my interest. So each one of us has our own filter. It's a very personal thing on where you want to do and what you want to do with your life. And so for me, it's really been about trying out new fun opportunities and then remaining a little bit detached, not in the Gita way, but being a little bit detached about, maybe it'll work, maybe it won't work. Either way, I will learn something. And to your point, in that kind of model, success and failure are actually equal.
Ah, interesting. Interesting. And because they teach you such important life lessons, as you said.
And you learn more in the failures than the success, by far, by far.
Yeah, I was struggling with failure, I think, because there was a startup, which was my midlife crisis. And then I started meeting all of these incredible CEOs and founders who said 95% of startup, 90 to 95% of startups fail. So just don't get emotional, move
Yeah,
on to the next thing. But
yeah,
it's very hard, I would say.
it is very hard.
The other thing is, just last few questions for you is also on leadership, because I feel like it's very different when you're leading in an organization. Like I've seen this even, sort of when I was in tech or in the media versus when you have your own organization. The kind of leader you think you are versus who you end up being is very different, I feel sometimes. But where do you think today's leaders need to sort of index on compassion or empathy, given all the volatility? And they've been saying we're going from a VUCA to a Bani world, all of this brittle, incomprehensible, essentially, lots of anxiety in general with people. Where do you sort of index on that compassion and empathy, and where do you sort of lead with that kind of calm confidence versus, even in sort of the crisis situations that you've been part of or had to oversee? What kind of leader have you learned to be?
A very simple model for leadership, which is that it's really about three things. You have to lead performance. So you have to deliver results. You have to get the job done. You have to deliver outcomes. And that's the necessary condition for leadership. You can't call yourself a leader or you won't be considered a leader. Ultimately, leadership is about how other people view you, not how you view yourself. And when people evaluate you, they evaluate you for results. That has never gone away and will never go. But in today's day and age, and the aspect that you're referring to, while leading performance is a necessary condition, leading people is a sufficient condition. What do I mean? If you don't lead people, then you definitely won't be seen as a leader either. You have to be able to do that. And the third piece is, which is more about you, which is how well do you lead yourself? Do you lose it under pressure? Do you throw your team under the bus when things don't go well? How do you lead yourself? Right. I think these are the three common big themes in leadership, which I think are evergreen and sustaining and won't change. I think in today's day and age, what has happened is that the lead people thing has become very critical. When we were just starting our careers, you could work under a tyrant and you could work in a toxic workplace. In fact, these words were not even invented. We took it for granted, right? So the focus was just on delivery. And in the name of delivery, people used to do whatever, even if they didn't deliver, they could get away with murder. I think the answer to this is a relatively simple one, but difficult to implement. And that is that I have always, in a situation, your leadership gets experienced, your leadership gets registered when people experience your leadership. You will think of me as a leader based on what you read about me, but that's not important. We are talking about if we were working together, what did you think of me, right? You will experience that in an interaction when we are working on something together, when shit happens, when crisis happens, and how I react with you and how do I work with you. Suppose you underperform and you're not able to deliver results, or you screw up, you genuinely make a mistake and it's a disaster. I think the answer to that lies in today's day and age when there's so much pressure to be empathetic, compassionate, considerate, look after your employees and all that, is to constantly try to separate the task from the person. This is very difficult to do because you always conflate the task with the person. So you did a bad job, you are stupid. Now we are conflating. You're not stupid, you made a mistake. So focus on having a tough conversation with Amrita about the mistake she made and how can we prevent mistakes in the future. But don't allow that to lower your respect for who Amrita is and what her capabilities and skills and her ability to bounce back from this blip might be. I think what has helped me personally is really being constantly able to look at a situation for the situation and not immediately conflate it and start drawing conclusions and judgments about the person. It may be that you are indeed incompetent for a minute, right? But if I'm going to address the situation right there and then, the best thing is not to say, look, you're stupid and you couldn't get it done. Maybe you are stupid. And sorry, I don't mean you, but you know what I'm saying. But in the interaction as a leader today, you have to say, look, what happened was stupid. That situation was stupid. That situation should be not happening again. And let me ask you how I can help you. I believe that you should be able to correct this. Is there anything I can do to help you? We were just discussing this today with somebody in an organization that I'm part of, where we actually have to literally fire somebody who's been around for 10 years. This person has been always there with us, and this person has always delivered. But look, we are in a very different place, and this is a horse that is not good for this new course. This person has to go because she's also a blocker in our system. She's not allowing the new person to function. So this is exactly what we were talking about. And what has happened is, in the past, we have not dealt well with such people. We've allowed newcomers to read them the riot act and ask them. I think that's not good. We owe them. We have to be empathetic and compassionate. So we discussed this and we said, look, firstly, we as the original leaders who hired her and were her bosses have to sit her down. We can't palm this off and delegate this now, because it's a difficult conversation to the new person and say, oh, you be the bad guy, right? Bad cop. So firstly, you have to accept that you have to have the difficult conversation. And in that difficult conversation, you have to separate the work that is not happening from the person this person is and how they have contributed and been loyal to our cause through very, very difficult times for the last 10 years. Who stays in an organization for 10 years these days, right? Now, I'm not saying it's easy to do, but at least I have found in my journey that this is the best way to manage both the pressure to deliver, perform, give results, meet objectives and goals, as well as the same time allowing the person to take a vacation if they want, or take care of an ailing mother or father or child, or just take a break, or do what they have to do to look after themselves, right? I think that's the only way to do it, is to separate the work and the people.
Don't conflate the two. This is such a masterclass, Pramath, I have to say. You have to have your own podcast if you don't already from your courses. So final question, we just like to wind down with, is there anything you're grateful for, any gratitude you want to share?
I'm just very grateful for all the people who've given me opportunities. It's been amazing. I wouldn't have been here if people didn't offer me the opportunities to do what I got to do. Rajat Gupta catching me in a hallway and saying, hey, can you help me with this proposal to, or a bunch of friends in Delhi saying, we want to build a university, why don't you join us? I've been very, very fortunate to have people offer me things which ultimately led to such wonderful things that happened in my life and have been so fulfilling. So I'm really grateful for that. Yes, I am.
Thank you so much. And I've heard that you extend that forward. I know that you pay that forward. Thank you so much for all that you do. Thank you for this conversation. I really appreciate your taking that.
Thank you for reaching out, and thank you for all these wonderful questions. When people ask me for podcasts these days, I'm like, I'm so jaded, but you asked me a really good set of questions. So
Oh, thank you.
my
Yeah.
compliments to you. Thank you.
Thank you so much.